Hey, what's going on, guys? My name's Cody. I'm a private boater, and today I'm going to take time to talk about river permits. And this video, I'm going to really just focus on the four river lotteries that deal with the four most common Idaho rafted overnight trips. So first, I'll bring up this screen here. Um, so when you most are done through recreation.gov. There's some permits that are ran by national parks or BLM, and those you might find through a different website. But for the four rivers I'm talking about today, it's on recreation.gov. So I have an account like most people do, and the best way to find them is look up four river lotteries. So I just type in four river, and the ones that I'm really talking about: Selway, Salmon, Middle Fork, and Hell's Canyon. These rivers, starting December 1st, going through January 31st, there's a lottery opening. And so during that 2 month window, you can go in and actually apply or put in your application to run one of these four rivers that in the later summer months, you'll actually get to run them. And a lot of people, I think, get confused on these the calling them the four rivers is that they think they apply for one, that they apply for all of them. And so what you actually have to do is you have to go in and apply for each one specifically. And I honestly don't know how it started as calling them the four rivers. I bet somebody out there knows, so please leave it in the comments. But I'm going to start with the Middle Fork. So Middle Fork is definitely the most popular of these four permits. I believe it gets about double the amount of applications than the other three, and I think mainly because it's a beautiful trip. The camps are great, and there's really a lot of draw for it. So uh, when you go to register, and I've already registered, so this won't work, but you come in here and you're looking for this register for lottery uh, tab. And then underneath it, you'll see available permits. Where a lot of people get confused is they'll see these available permits and they think that's actually what they're going for. And on the Middle Fork and most of these rivers, they have a controlled season and a uncontrolled season. So like a lottery season, and all those dates you can find down here on the important dates tab. And so it'll tell you that on this river, May 28th through September 3rd, you must win these through lottery. Definitely this time of the year. And then if people give them back, then they go to a first come, first serve. But I would say 98% of people launching between May 28th and September 3rd are winning this by a lottery. For the Middle Fork, then it really depends on timing of when you want to go on the Middle Fork. So uh, there's two main accesses. One's flying into Indian. The other is driving into Boundary Creek. And where the difficulty of that is sometimes early season, this May 28th time, the road could be closed going into Boundary, forcing you to fly in. Then what that also said is uh, earlier in the season, it's colder, so you need to be more prepared and be a person that enjoys going cold water boating, and then have the ability to uh, deal with high water trips too, because the this time that May through early June, you could have pretty significant flows. And what's hard is we're applying for the permits in December and January, and we don't really know what the snowpack's going to do. If we could apply for these like May 1st, I think it would be a lot easier to really determine when high flow is not. So I would say if you're not a person that feels comfortable going 5 feet plus on the in the Middle Fork of the Salmon, just apply for later in the year. So apply for July 15th and on. Uh, good good weather, really consistent medium flows. You might still need to fly into Indian if you don't want to deal with the shallow water up top, but that's not that big of a deal. So the other thing I really like about definitely on the Middle Fork is they release how many permits are actually available each day and who they're allocated to. So, just like any other river, we have private trips and commercial trips using the same river, and we can't have, you know, this river controls it down to 7 groups get to launch a day. So sometimes, if you can see on here, like the 4th of July, 5 private groups get to go on 4th of July, and only 2 commercial trips are launching that day. And I like this because then I can kind of figure out what am I applying for. I'm probably not going to apply for this July 8th, that there's only 2 private trips, because it just reduces my chances. And then you'll find that sometimes there's rollovers. So in the last 2 years, there's been some blowouts that closed down launches from Boundary Creek, and private trips were able to roll over their trips because it was a short notice closure of Boundary. So I think there's some pros and cons to allowing private boaters to be able to roll their stuff over. I know there's a lot of people that are pretty angry that private boaters can do that. But they're for very far and few between situations. And I would rather have, these 2 or 3 groups that they're probably their first time ever getting to go down the Middle Fork, get to have an enjoyable trip instead of just canceling and then having to wait like another 10 years to get their permit. So, outside of that, like I would say, talking about kind of river flows on the Middle Fork, it's an inexact science, right? But you can assume that May through June, the water levels are going to be increasing as the snow starts melting. And then you'll find that at a point, that snow, just definitely in the high elevations and the different areas, are going to slow down just because it's all melted off. And then you'll start seeing the river come down. So it could peak at 7 feet, could peak at 8 feet or 5 feet. But then you'll see a pretty consistent decline throughout the summer. And then July 1st, you could have really good flows like in the 4-foot range, or you could be already down to the 2-foot range. So it's so dramatic on these short, non-dam controlled rivers, which I think are amazing. We should have them. But we just don't know what the river flow is when we're putting in. So I would say July 15th through July 31st is a super solid time to put on, because you're gonna get pretty consistent flows, but those are the most popular times to put in. So if you don't mind low water boating, put in August. It might be a little warm. You might have lower flows, but you're really only dealing with the low flows, for of consequence for the first 20 so miles. And you could even fly into Indian. You can deadhead as a private boater. So there's some other ways to attack this river. And so I don't think you just have to put in for, middle of July. So next I want to talk about the Salmon River. On the Salmon River here, I think a lot of people get confused because I just talked about the Middle Fork of the Salmon. Well, the Middle Fork is actually a completely separate river. And I know probably 80% of you watching out there on YouTube think that's ridiculous that I have to tell people that. It's a common issue that I've seen where people think that Middle Fork of the Salmon or Middle Fork of a river means the middle run. And just because we don't run into like forks of rivers that much on multi-day trips. If you're a day boater, I think you run into it a lot more. But on multi-days, you're just not doing forks of rivers that often. The Middle Fork flows down into the Salmon River, and you actually finish your trip on the Salmon River. Then this section that I'm talking about is most people refer to this Salmon Four Rivers Lottery as the main salmon. And this is not to be confused with like a middle salmon or a lower salmon. So the lower salmon is in Whitebird and goes down to the confluence. The main salmon goes from that takeout of the Middle Fork and then runs for about 6 or 7 days down to just above Riggins. So for the Salmon River, their lottery season is a little bit different. So you're going for June 20th through September 7th. That's when the non-permitted or the permitted season is, and then anything that happens before or after that, I believe it's a nine. They have allowed 99 groups to go down. So June 19th is a very popular time to go down the main salmon because you can, get pretty much unlimited permits during that time. And then, so talking about the main salmon, I would say this is further down the drainage than the Middle Fork, right? Because this is that put ins the takeout of the Middle Fork. You're going to have higher water longer on this river. So this high water season is like June through like early July, even like into middle of July. And then after that, that's when this river really starts dropping. And so you really see like really popular times or like right around the end of July, beginning of August. Pretty consistent temperatures, pretty consistent flows. But this can be ran all the way into September 7th with no problem. Probably just need to add a day onto your trip. But I would say that middle of August to like 10 days into August to like the last, 15 days of July are a great time to put in for this river. So next, I want to talk about the sellway. The sellway on these river out of these 4 permits, I would say this is the most difficult river out of the 4. It is super remote. The put in is a 3-hour gravel road in. That's incredibly bad. There's a few airports along the way, like Bush airports, that in the need of an evacuation, you would have the possibility. And then the takeout is also kind of in the middle of nowhere. So you go through this beautiful wilderness area, but it's a very remote trip with not a lot of people on it. There's one group a day that gets to go down there, and that's one group private, one group commercial. So you'll see like when you go to register for lottery that there'll be some days that you can't apply for, and those aren't rollover days. Those are days that a commercial trip is launching. The I don't really know why they allow only one group a day. I feel like this river could handle maybe 2 a day, but I could see that a lot of people do layovers right at Moose Creek so they can go down and scout, and you just run out of campsites in that area. So I could see like if everyone's doing layovers in that area, that you could really run out of some campsites really quick. But it's a gorgeous river, but I would say this requires like if you have solid class 4 skills, this is a river you should go on. If you're a solid 3+ boater, I don't know. It's very steep. It's super continuous. The flows on this river, I think, are the most dramatic out of all the rivers, just because it's like the salmon, the main, it's lower in the drainage. So you have more rivers and tributaries coming in. So it's that you have this more, I feel like, consistency because you're adding 100 rivers, and so one river might be like a little bit on the low side, one might be a little bit on the high side, but it averages out as you get lower into that drainage. That the Selway, there's really nothing to really hold the water, so it's all snowmelt coming down into that drainage, and so you can get 10-20,000 CFS flows, or in the late summer you could be at 2,000. So I think that's what makes the Selway incredibly tough, is that inconsistent flows. We launched last year in June 7th, I believe. And that's historically the highest water day that you could apply for a permit. And we just got lucky. We got great flows the entire time. The peak, it was a super warm and wet May. And so it melted all the snow before we got there. And so we were hitting the river on the drop. And we got it like perfectly for a 3-day stretch. So if you are applying for permits and there's a lot of new stuff coming at you in this video, I would highly suggest not putting in for the sellway. I think a lot of people think the sellway's easier because it's so hard to get, that they think like, whoa, if there's that many people putting in for these permits, and that it can't be that hard of a river. And I would say if you live here in Oregon, and you would say like the Illinois is totally off the radar for me. There's no way I would go on the Illinois. I wouldn't put in for the sellway. So last is, pull it up here, is a snake. There we go. Is a Hell's Canyon run through the Snake River. So this is separating Idaho on one side of the river, Oregon on the other. You launch right here at this visitor center. That's this main picture here. This is a great run. This was actually my very first run that I did of any of the 4 rivers. It's the deepest river canyon. It's like 7,000 feet at its deepest point. I believe they allow 3 groups a day to go down this privately. And it's surprisingly the most returned river lottery out of these 4. And so I've got a buddy that has never won a river permit in his life, and he goes on the Hell's Canyon run all the time because he just watches for cancellations to come up. So after the lottery season, if you were looking for cancellations, right here where it says like lottery, over time, then it'll just become an A and it'll become available. And you can just pick one up, pay for it, and then go on your river trip. So that's about all I got for river permits. On the Hell's Canyon, I would say pretty much any time is great to go. It's dam controlled. There's a few things I don't like about the Snake. It's because it's dam controlled, the water gets really high in the afternoon, or can get really high in the afternoon. And then when you wake up in the morning, all your boats are dry because the water receded. Sometimes like in that upper canyon, we saw like 20-foot river height swings. So, that's kind of annoying. There's a lot of power boaters on that river that take up a lot of the good camps, but the Whitewater in the Hell's Canyon run is absolutely incredible. And then there's a few different takeouts that you can take, and you can extend your trip or make it short. So I'll do another video just on the Hell's Canyon and these rivers over time. But I just kind of wanted to really hit on these lotteries. And if you have any questions or like issues, please hit me up. I'm happy to try to answer them for you guys. Outside of that, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you guys are successful this year on permits.